The studio with me now is Chris Stockwell from Kingham Lodge to be specific, and in front of Chris are several items of sculpture, all actually of a very high standard, and they're here because Chris is running the sculpture park. Really, you've turned your garden into a sculpture park at Kingham Lodge, haven't you? Which is a fantastically generous thing to do because it's also a very beautiful garden. This is Kingham up near Chipping Norton, and this is the second time you've taken on this event, and it's part of the broader Oxfordshire Art Weeks.
Yes, it's part of Oxfordshire Art Weeks, which takes place all over the county, different fortnights in different parts of the county, and this is now North Oxfordshire's turn. And there are a number of brilliant studios open where you can see all sorts of things. But we've gathered together in Kingham some 30 of the local sculptors and some pieces from Zimbabwe, which have been produced by a cooperative of sculptors whom we helped with funds that we raised from our last exhibition.
Yeah. Now, one of our wonderful producers, Will Wilkin, has been in here taking a photograph of the sculptures, which you'll be able to see on our Facebook page in due course, which is facebook.com/BBC Oxford. But let's just try and do the most difficult thing on radio you can possibly try and do, Chris, which is to describe works of art using the power of language only. So there's one sculpture which is by you there, which reminds me very much of a Giacometti piece in so much as it's... is it bronze?
It is a bronze.
Yeah.
This is by one of our local sculptors, Dawn Benson, and it's a sculpture of a seated couple. And we've got 2 or 3 of her bronzes on display and a couple of her garden pieces out in the garden. There are then other lovely bronzes by Andrew Frieden, another local sculptor, by Jessica von Schroeder, another one.
Wait, this weighs a ton.
Oh, they do weigh a ton, some of these things.
Good gracious. It's
There's
on
a pair of marble hands by
plinth.
Andrew Frieden, and it takes 2 people to move it about.
But this. Sorry, just remind me of the artist's name.
Dawn Benson.
Dawn Benson. This is a really high quality piece of work. It is very reminiscent of Giacometti, as you say. It's rather lovely portrait of a couple sitting on a wooden bench. She leaning into him, and lovely. I have to ask, of course, because it's a vulgar question we need to ask, is how much would one have to pay to own this?
Well, that's around £3,000.
Okay.
There are several bronzes around that sort of price.
Well, given that a Giacometti sold for nearly £100 million, it doesn't...
Well, we haven't got anything over 12,000.
Okay.
And at the bottom end of it, we have little things like this giraffe. And that's only £10. But that in its own way is quite as an extraordinary a tale.
Go on.
This is one from Zimbabwe. It's made by a chap in a wheelchair whose wheelchair is literally falling apart. It's held together with bits of wire when I last saw it. And he makes these sculptures of African animals out of recycled tins from Coca-Cola and Fanta.
This is an old Coke can, isn't it?
It's an old Coke can. And he hammers these out and cuts them into strips, and by hand then weaves these strips round metal frames. And they are sculptures in their own right. Every single one of them is different. They've got a little bit of character to them. And they're brilliant little pieces of work.
I'll give you £10 for that, Chris.
Righto, you're on.
I'll put that on the side. It's lovely. I'll start my art collection. Thank you very much. Terrific. There we go. Okay. So what got you started in all this? Because you and your wife, Delphi, you're not artists, are you?
Not particularly.
No.
I'm a very keen gardener, so we've created a 5-acre garden at Kingham,
Yeah.
and it's now reaching some degree of maturity after 20 years. And at the moment, with the rhododendrons and azaleas out and the tree poppies out,
Wonderful.
and still some cherry blossom and other tree blossom around, it's all looking very beautiful. And
So part of this show is an open garden.
it is an open garden, and it's a big garden, so we can cope with an awful lot of people in it without it feeling congested. And it was suggested to us a few years ago that we might open it for art weeks for some local sculptors to exhibit their work. We did it 2 years ago. Several thousand people came to see, and we raised £20,000 for charities. So we thought, well, we can't do it every year. It takes an awful lot of work. But every 2 years we could just about cope with. So this is our second time of doing it.
And how do you go about choosing who to show?
Well, the initial assembly of sculptors was done by a chap called Lennon Cantlebury. And he is himself a sculptor and knows quite a few other local sculptors. And so he got us a group together last time and has helped this time. And then we've added to that some sculptors from elsewhere around the country whose work I've seen at different places. and one or two of them have been quite difficult to track down. There's a pair of raven's wings on show, which are fabulous pieces. Think of the delicacy of feathers.
Yes.
And these feathers are made out of pieces of slate, old roof slates. And they're absolutely beautiful, fluttering in the wind at the moment. Lots of wind.
Plenty of wind, yeah.
And, they're something that we found on a different sculpture exhibition and said to him, would he like to come and show them? And now they're hanging in our pergola next door to some works of art by local children. Several local schools have exhibited, and we've got a whole set of rats from the Cotswold School running in and out of the little box hedges on the parterre. There's some brilliant woodland creatures made by the primary school children from Bledington, crawling in and out of a cherry tree and a pine tree, and all sorts of owls and squirrels, snails, slugs, spiders. A fantastic collection of little things.
So how many works in all in your garden at the moment for part of the show?
Well, I think there's something like 400 pieces that are for sale, one way and another, and then there's the school exhibits, and I'm afraid I haven't counted how many different creatures there are there, but there's
hundreds.
Hundreds, absolutely. And there will be hundreds of children coming to see this week.
Chris, we'll talk much more about this in a minute, but first we're going to have a tune by Buffalo Springfield. Are you a fan?
I'm afraid I don't know him, but I'm looking forward to it.
Well, here we go. It's called For What It's Worth. That's Buffalo Springfield. Enjoy that, Chris?
I did. It was very good.
Fantastic. So we've only really scratched the surface of what you're doing here. So this is a display of sculpture that people can see at your home and garden, which is about 5 acres in size up in Kingham. But everything you sell, every penny you make from selling teas or lunches or sculptures, whatever it might be, goes to charity.
All of it goes to charity. People are very generous with their donations. We have a large bucket in which we ask people to put donations, because, of course, entry for every Oxford Art Weeks project is free. And so people put money in the donations bucket, they buy sculptures, and money from those goes to the different charities. And they buy teas, coffees, lunches, all of which are homemade, and the profit from all of those goes to charities.
And all of which are delicious, because I've sampled many of them. Now, Chris, there's a specific focus, is there not, on Zimbabwe?
Well, we've got a number of Zimbabwe pieces here.
Because?
Last time we raised money for a group of sculptors in Zimbabwe who had set up a cooperative and who had no water on the site. And so we raised enough money last time to dig them a borehole, so they've now got fresh water, both for drinking and for sanitary purposes, for the sculptors and for the people who visit their sculpture park. Quite unlike any English sculpture park, because it's very, very dry, of course.
Yeah.
And this time what we're hoping to do is to raise enough money for an exhibition hall and schoolroom for them that they can use for local community purposes.
And this is a town just outside of Harare?
Just outside Harare, Chitangiza. And what we have done is to import a container load of their work, and that's being exhibited in the gardens and in the 2 indoor sculpture galleries at Kingham Lodge.
I'm looking at one here. So it's a beautiful, is it stone fish?
They're all stone pieces,
yeah.
Apart from these little recycled cans. But all the stones that are being used are local to Zimbabwe. There's some beautiful stone there. And this particular chap does fishes. He has got some lovely fishes, some quite small, some very big. This chap's using a different type of stone, lovely green colouring, a bit
it's
like
mottled,
a jade.
Isn't it?
It's mottled, absolutely. Yeah. Carved a sleeping buck in it, something, of course, that is local to them, to see a buck sleeping, a deer.
And that fantastic bowl you've just got by your hand.
Well, this is modelled on an avocado shell and looks just like a very large avocado shell.
It looks like a piece of porcelain from where I'm sitting.
Absolutely. Could easily have been. But this is actually all carved from stone, and the outer surface is rough, like an avocado shell, same sort of texture, and then inside it's beautifully smooth. And it's a lovely piece of work.
And again,
skill.
that question, what would one be paying for that, Chris?
Oh, the Zimbabwean pieces are really quite cheap. They're sort of £100, £150 sort of thing.
Fantastically good value.
Incredibly good value.
So what was your connection, I mean, with Zimbabwe? Was it just a random association, or is it more personal than that?
No, it's pretty random. We saw some years ago a piece of Zimbabwean sculpture and fell in love with it, and we've had it in our garden for some years in one of our ponds. And then, by chance, I met somebody who was able to tell me a good deal more about Zimbabwe and about the life of the people there, both the whites and the blacks. And we've been able to get in touch with this sculpture group in Chittengiza and to say to them, look, we will try to help by selling some of your work and by helping you with the proceeds. And so I financed the import of a container load of their sculptures, and that's what we have for sale. And it's an amazingly high standard of work.
Really? I'm looking at it now, and I can tell you it is extraordinary. I'm amazed. At the quality of the work, the high standard you say, but also the value. I mean, as far as our works are concerned, these are really totally at the cheaper end. They're very inexpensive for what they are. They're a bargain.
Yes, absolutely. For what they are, they're an incredible bargain. But there are some lovely pieces by some of the Oxfordshire sculptors as well. This glass cross is by a local glass artist, and this is less than £100. She's a girl called Jackie Pavlovsky, and works in glass. There's some lovely pieces, these little crosses, some figures made out of slumped glass. After a rather beautiful girl who was clearly lying there and had the mould made on top of her, and then the glass has been poured over that. There's some lovely angel's wings by her as well that glow over a light.
And this stone piece here you got in front of you?
This stone piece is another Zimbabwean piece. It's two ladies dancing or leaning back into each other, and lovely expression on their faces, beautiful textures in the stone, and very cleverly done out of a green stone that, by the way it's carved, also gives you white effects. It's lovely.
Wonderful, Chris. We'll come back to you in a minute just to talk about opening times and hours. We'll hear from Mama Cass.
Will Gompertz on digital 95.2 FM and online.
BBC Radio Oxford.
Radio for Oxfordshire.
And in the studio with me is Chris Stockwell from Kingham Lodge, whose garden is open to the public for the next week, and it is full of the most incredible sculptures, some of which Chris has brought into the studio for us to look at now, which you can see on our Facebook page at Facebook.com/BBC Oxford. Also, the garden is, I've been there myself, the garden is absolutely spectacular. It's worth a visit on its own. But also the thing about this show of sculptures is that they are affordable for almost everybody. I've just bought one from you for a tenner. You said the rest of those would probably go today. So from £10 is the cheapest, £12,000 is the most expensive, which in the world of sculpture is a lot of money. But it's, you can get some really wonderful stuff. You've got these fantastic Zimbabwean works for cheap as chips prices, really, for what they are. What the crucial thing we need to know, of course, Chris, is when you're open and for how long?
Well, we're open all this week and next weekend, from 11 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock in the evening.
So you open in 35 minutes?
We do indeed. I shall just about get back in time.
And are you on the gate? Are you on the door?
I'm on the gate. We welcome people personally. I've got my brother-in-law helping me at the moment. My wife and all the children are scurrying around in the cafe serving teas and so on, again with help from a number of young friends, some of whose legs work faster than mine.
Yes. And does the weather matter much? I mean, it was terrifically windy yesterday, for example. Are you finding you're running around picking sculptures up off the grass?
No, well, one or two we've had to prop up a couple of times now where the wind gets really strong. But basically, it's pretty okay, whatever the weather. If it's pouring with rain, then shelter inside and have a cup of coffee. The showers go over quite quickly. And there are 2 indoor galleries to see, so there is plenty to do while the shower is there. And then out again into the garden, because it's lovely to walk around at the moment.
I mean, this is something you did for the first time 2 years ago. Is it something, having done it now, and it seems to me to be picking up something of a momentum that you might continue with more regularly?
Well, I don't know that we'll do it more often. I think every 2 years is probably enough. We want new pieces from the sculptors each time. We don't want to show the same sorts of things. So sculptors need time to produce their works. And we want some new sculptors each time as well, so that there are, again, new things for people to see.
Let's keep it fresh.
Yes, keep it fresh. Gardens change all the time, naturally, and having different things to see and therefore displaying them in different places in the garden makes for a different exhibition. And that's part of the fun of it. This is not just like walking into a museum and seeing lots of things in showcases. all these pieces of sculpture are positioned in the garden in the way that people could use them themselves.
And do you do that act of curatorship yourself, or do the
Yes.
artists choose where it goes?
No, I choose where things go because I know the garden well, having designed it, and can find places that are likely to show off that particular piece of sculpture.
And do you
so-
ever get yourself in a situation, Chris, where you've chosen a piece of sculpture to go into a certain spot and you think, that's just magical, I got to own that?
Well, 2 pieces stayed behind from last exhibition, and I dare say 1 or 2 will stay behind this time as well. They do really look very good in some situations.
They look splendid. Okay, so it is open. The sculpture at Kingham Lodge is open today and for the rest of this week and for next weekend from 11 o'clock till 6 o'clock every day. There's food and drink available, all home cooked, all of the highest quality, sculptures from £10 upwards.
And all in aid of some excellent charities.
Absolutely. Helen and Douglas House.
Helen and Douglas House is the local children's hospice that we're helping. Education, art education in the local schools, where some of whom have done some brilliant exhibits to see. And then further afield, the Kersler Trust, which does artwork in prisons, and then a leper colony in India, and this group of sculptors in Chittengiza.
Chris, hats off to you. I think this is a really fantastic initiative, and it really is at the highest level as well. People travel miles to go to Yorkshire Sculpture Park when they've got Kingham Lodge just up the road. Okay, let's find out what the weather's going to be like for all those thousands of people who are coming to your house this afternoon.